Welcome to What's Your Mount Rushmore podcast with hosts Mark Duval and John Hanson.
Are you kidding me?
Two old friends and knuckleheads discussing and covering their top four choices for any and all topics, making up their Mount Rushmore selections each week. Nothing is off limits. As you listen, remember we always want to know, what's your Mount Rushmore?
All right, nerds, welcome back. We got a fun one ahead of us. This one's kind of cool. It again covers kind of a key area. This is What's Your Mount Rushmore? It's our podcast. You've been listening. We've been watching. We're paying attention. And this is a fun topic we're going to cover today. I'm one of the hosts. My name is Mark Duval.
And my name is John Hanson. I'm the other host over in the other corner here. And yeah, you mentioned it. It's going to be a fun one. This is a different one. We've talked about doing this one for a while. We weren't sure how to frame it. But what we're talking about today is our Mount Rushmore of video games.
Yes.
And that sounds like a broad category, and it definitely is a broad category. The reason I said that we had some talk about how to frame this was there was times where we talked about different platforms. Do we do like one that's just about our old school love of Nintendo games, more recent platforms?
Only arcade.
Yeah, only arcade games. We decided to scrap all of that and lump it all into one big bucket.
Yeah.
So we've got our Mount Rushmore of video games. And so this covers everything. It covers everything from the arcade to your home platform. I mean, it could even cover mobile games on your phone. I mean, it's literally the entire gamut of video games that we're going to be covering today.
Which made it a lot harder, by the way, because yeah, it's one thing if you get zeroed in on a specific topic, like Nintendo when we were younger. Okay, that's its own thing. But once you go, nope, you get four choices to cover the whole damn topic of video gaming.
The entire world and entire history of gaming,
Yeah.
and you and I have been around a few years. We've seen a lot of video games. So this was an interesting one. And before I get into my first pick, I'm going to throw a couple of nuggets at you and see if you've familiar with it. First of all, let me ask you this. Is Bertie the Brain on your Mount Rushmore of video games by chance?
It's not on my Mount Rushmore. It's not in my vocabulary. It's not even in my mind's. It's not even on the horizon of me knowing what the hell you just said.
Well, let me introduce Bertie the Brain to you. That is the first publicly displayed video game. It was a tic-tac-toe game that used like light bulbs, and you would actually play against the computer. This was in 1950. Can you believe that? 1950 was the first publicly displayed video game. People would play against this. It was a giant computer. It was 13 feet tall, and they called it Bertie the Brain.
Oh, for God's sakes!
And it would kick your ass at tic-tac-toe. So there you go.
What a riot a minute with that one. Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. And ironically, people lined up to play it. It was a big hit. But anyway, I was also going to mention something that's a little closer to home for us as Minnesotans. Oregon Trail. You've played that game. I don't think that's going to be on your Mount Rushmore either. I'm going to make an assumption that it's not.
It's not.
But did you know that was created in 1971 by teachers in Minneapolis?
Did not know that. I definitely know the game because I've died from dysentery several times playing it.
We all have. That's probably the only way you die in that game, but you do always die. Nobody ever actually gets to the end of Oregon Trail. I don't think you die. But
a fun game. Everyone dies from diarrhea.
Yeah. It's not the most pleasant way to die in real life or in a video game. But anyway, yeah, so it's a Minnesotan game. Obviously it was popular across the country in the 80s, but started out in the 70s in Minnesota. So we don't just entertain, we also educate.
Yeah,
here.
We're here. We're knowledge providers. I wonder why Oregon Trail then? Why Oregon?
Like the name of it, you mean?
Yeah, if it's a Minneapolis, Minnesota-based thing, why they? I wonder why they locked and landed on Oregon.
It was used as a teaching device for history class. These were history teachers. So they had these history teachers created this to teach kids about, I don't know, the Oregon Trail, Western expansion, that small part of U.S. history. So they just made this game that was about that particular part of U.S. history. And then, I mean, it happened to take off and was very popular. So it was meant as that's why we all played it in school, because it was meant as like a sort of a history lesson. But I don't think anybody ever actually played it at home.
No, not once.
That is why it is not on our list. My first pick for the video game genre, this is definitely not educational. My first game is the Madden NFL franchise. And I say the franchise because I wasn't able to really pick an exact year on this.
You're kind of bailing out with that answer, but I'll give it to you.
Well, I played the damn game probably for about 12 years in a row. Every year I just buy the new. I mean, it's probably started on Sega Genesis, I suppose, when I first started playing it, and then into the early PlayStations. And yeah, I think there was probably about a 10 or 12 year span where I was buying it almost every year. I played it a lot. Now, where I sit here today, it's probably been 10 or 15 years since I have played it. So it's not anything I've played recently, but I played it so much for a period of time that I had to have it on my list. A little fact about that game, it is the only NFL licensed game. There are multiple games in the baseball realm, multiple in, I think, probably NBA and NHL, but this is the only NFL licensed game. And it goes back to 1984. The EA is the name of the company, Electronic Arts, that created Madden Football. It's in the game, as they always said.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
They actually talked to John Madden about it in 1984, and he said, yeah, I like the idea, but it's got to be realistic. It has to be a realistic football game. And it took them until 1988 to actually put a game out.
Wow.
It took them 4 years of listening to him and taking advice from him to build a game that was up to his standards. He didn't want a game that was, sort of arcadey or cheesy. He wanted it to be like a real game, 11 on 11, real plays, and that's what we got. And now here we are, 35 some years later, it's still a hit.
Well, I mean, John Madden is just so tied to football in general because of his resume. But then he became a broadcaster, and then this video game took the world by storm.
And boom, the ball's there. Boom, we cross him. Boom. Like they do in wrestling. Boom, boom, right there. That's a wham block.
John Madden.
John Madden.
Yeah, you came out of the gate with a big swing there because obviously Madden is huge. It's undeniable. You'd sound like an absolute, shyster if you think that Madden's not a huge video game. It is big. I've played this game just like what you were just saying for years and years with friends, and then against the computer. I've probably played it more recently than you, just because I have like I've mentioned before on this, I have a 13-year-old son who clearly he got himself into video games the same way I did when I was younger. Which we'll be getting to, because again, we're covering our whole life of when video games were introduced to us to this very day when we're recording this podcast right now. And somehow we have to figure 4 spaces for all those video games. And it was really hard. And Madden is not on mine.
So let me ask you this quick then. Does Sonny play Madden like recently, like this year? Has he played it?
Yeah, he played in 2023. So this last football season, sure he played it. I don't think he would probably put it on his, but again, the whole world's changed. And you mentioned it earlier with phones and his smartphone and all that. They play so much, and not to mention the obvious one. Fortnite is definitely, that would be his GOAT. I mean, that's the one he's played the most of and spent the most time doing. And it's amazing because you watch him and his buddies and they play online. Obviously, they're talking to each other with their headsets. That's a whole different world than, when I was his age, I didn't have that. But Madden is a great pick, man. That's, like I said, you came out of the gate with a really big pick. Let me jump in here then. So I'll get my first pick out of the way. And I am going to kind of go back to, like I said, when I was young. And I'm going to talk about what I believe is the OG of home video games. And I think this video game changed the whole damn scene. And it was on a Nintendo platform, and it is Super Mario Brothers. It's a game changer, man. This thing was released in 1985 on Nintendo. Fast forward, it ended up selling 58 million copies of Super Mario.
Wow.
And think about it, that's a big number, man.
Just that one version.
Just the one version, the one that you would get.
There's been a million Mario games, but yeah.
And I'm sure that includes, because I know there was basically 2 ways to have Super Mario. You would and remember, these are when games were on cartridges, not a disc, certainly nothing you download online. But when you would buy a Nintendo back then, you would either just get Super Mario or you'd get the combo platter version, which was Super Mario and Duck Hunt or whatever the hell that game was stupid. And that was if you bought the Nintendo system with the little plastic gun. But Super Mario, man, I can't even count how many hours. And when that was first introduced to me, I had a sleepover at a friend of mine's house, and I had never even played Nintendo. And hell, I hadn't even seen a Nintendo at that point. And when I walk in, he had a big family, so a ton of siblings, and they're all huddled around their living room TV. And I'm like, what are you guys up to? I'm like dropping off my sleeping bag and walking into the living room going, what's going on? And they're like, oh, and this was like just after, I think, a Christmas had come and gone. And as a family, they got their first Nintendo. I sat down, and probably for the next hour and a half, I just simply watched him and his siblings play. And the second that the little controller was handed over to me, changed my life forever. Aww. Because up to that point, I had never played a video game at home before. Especially at my own home. I had seen Ataris, and I know one joker that lived near me where I grew up, he had Pong.
What?
And let's be honest, that's fun for about 3 minutes.
Pong? You're younger than I am, and I didn't know anybody that had Pong. That was before my time, even.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying it was common, but so
and it wasn't very current.
But when
that poor bastard had to still play Pong in the 80s.
Now that I think about it, he did get his ass whipped a lot by the rest of the neighborhood kids. I have no idea if that means or played into it or not. But seriously, though, Super Mario just kind of it changed everything, and the industry, I think as a whole, probably regards it as the best video game of all time. I've read like little articles about Super Mario and the impact it had, and it also was the first game that introduced the side-scrolling game platform, where your character basically runs left to right. But I wouldn't feel right in my own head if I'm doing a Mount Rushmore of video games and I don't put the one game that started it all for me on that list, and that's Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, I mean, it was important to you because, as you said, it was your first opportunity to play a game on a home console, and it's the one you remember the specific day. That's interesting. The specific day you've played it for the first time. I can't say that I remember the specific time I played any individual game, but that's pretty cool that you have that memory and it stuck with you. And you mentioned it being the biggest video game of all time. It's got to be at least the biggest franchise of all time because they've got movies and TV shows and cartoons and toys and a million different games too, between the racing games and all that. So,
well, not only that, I was just recently in LA, and we took our son to that Universal Studios, and they have a whole giant Nintendo Super Mario World. So yeah, you're right. It's a big one.
Did you take any mushrooms at Super Mario World?
I did not. Not appropriate.
Okay.
How dare you?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I know you. That's why I had to ask. Anyway, so that was a good one though. Are you done with your Mario flashback, or do you want to talk more about Pong? Or
do I want to talk more about?
Do you want to go a deep dive on Pong, or we should move on?
I think we could move on from Pong.
Okay.
All right. What's your second pick there?
I didn't think we'd mention Pong in this episode, but I'm glad we did. But anyway, so well, my second pick is kind of a nerdy pick. I'll be honest with you. It's the game. It's my only PC based game. It's the game Diablo, and Diablo was a cool game for a couple of reasons. But I played the first game, and I think I played the Diablo 2. There's actually 4 of them in total. The original came out in 1997, and I think Diablo 2 a couple of years after that. It's as I mentioned, the only PC game that's on my list, but and it's probably one of the only PC games that I really got into, because I was more into the Segas and the Sony PlayStations and even Xbox, but PC games weren't all that interesting to me, to be honest.
Can I jump in here with a question?
Yeah.
I'm going to speak on behalf of me and maybe the other listener out there that's thinking what I'm thinking right now. What the hell is Diablo? What are you talking about? I don't know this game.
What force wrought this destruction? Diablo, enter if you dare.
The third installment of Diablo is the fourth highest selling PC game of all time, just so you know. So the Diablo franchise of games has probably been it's one of the biggest selling game series of all time between their different iterations of it. But it was an RPG type game, role playing game, but it was action based. So you actually were fighting people. It was one of those games. This is why I say it's a bit of a nerdy, and you're going to say it's a nerdy thing because it has that D&D kind of feel to it.
Oh boy, here we go. See, now I'm starting to realize why I never heard of it.
Exactly.
I was out doing fun shit, and you were in front of your computer screen eating your little bags of chips.
You were beating up kids for playing Pong while I was at home playing Diablo.
When I could have been at your house beating you up for playing Diablo instead of the poor bastard who played Pong.
Well, like I said, one of the biggest selling game series of all time. You'd have a lot of asses that you wanted to kick. This is the cool thing about this game was it was multiplayer. So you're playing against your friends, either against your friends or with them. You could play both ways. So you could either cooperate with them, where you're playing together, or you're playing against them. And it was a fun game in that sense. They created this game actually with a sports game style in mind, in the sense that you could turn this game on within about a minute. You're in the game playing, killing monsters and shit. So it wasn't like some of those games where you have to sit, I got to create a cleric and figure out what kind of clothes he's going to wear. And is he going to carry a staff? No. With this game, you could turn it on, a couple buttons, and you're killing things.
Excellent.
All right, Shitstick, what do you got?
All right, I'm gonna jump. I'm actually gonna jump. Kind of do this somewhat chronologically. And my next pick is, you referenced this company earlier, and I know I'll be talking about them again. Is EA Sports. EA Sports kind of cornered the market on just really good sports games. But this one, again, it's just the teeth of my high school life. So when we were hanging out, my group of friends, it would always go kind of in cycles of what sports game specifically you'd be playing. But the one that really, I believe, best represents my high school life of video games, it's EA Sports NHL 1994, or as it's known, NHL 94. And
okay,
it was this. I mean, it's one of those games that I can't imagine how many hours we racked up playing each other, and the heated exchanges while playing this. And it's also why the movie Swingers with Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau, that scene in that movie where they are in their apartment in LA and they're playing, I believe it's either NHL 93 or NHL 94. I've never officially found out, but it's unbelievably recognizable, especially Vince Vaughn's character in Swingers. He's playing with the Chicago Blackhawks, which ironically, that was exclusively the team I played with, because I loved Jeremy Roenick and I loved my goalie, Ed Belfour. And I would always play my buddy Mike. He was always the Vancouver Canucks, and he had this little sissy of a player called Pavel Burr. But my word, did we have heated exchanges, just like the scene from the movie Swingers, where they actually get into real kind of fisticuffs tussling over a damn video game.
Watch out, motherfucker.
Do not fucking hit my elbow.
It's not even so much me as it's Roenick. He's good.
Oh, is that right?
Elio steals the Roenick.
You bitch!
Score, Chicago!
Fuck, man.
Oh! That was pretty.
Such fucking bullshit.
But that was pretty, Sue. Check this out on the instant replay.
Dude, do not.
And that one, again, I can't count the hours. That was such a cool game, and how excited we would get when the new version would come out. And it was just a lot of fun. Once you really kind of mastered how to play the NHL games and how to kind of use and know how your skaters would react to your direction buttons and all that, fun game, man. So that's my number 2 spot, and I am being specific, NHL 94.
I got to be honest, I wouldn't have even considered an NHL game for my list because I've never played one that I really enjoyed.
What?
Really? Kind of, yeah. I mean, they never really do it for me.
Interesting.
They're hard to play. I mean, it's hard to compared to other sports games. They're hard to play, I should say. It just doesn't really.
Yeah, because there is nuances that you got to you only kind of figure out by playing a lot, and then it gets a lot easier.
Yeah, well, I suppose like any game is
true
to a certain degree like that.
But I proudly stand with that as my second pick, NHL 94.
Well, my last one here is another one from a massive franchise, or actually my last one. My third pick is from a massive franchise, and I'll be kind of surprised if you don't have one of these games on your list. It's Grand Theft Auto, specifically the Vice City game. The GTA, as the kids like to call that series, was a massive franchise.
That was huge.
A little controversial, of course, because of the over-the-top violence and
Content.
the content. It was probably not for the youngest of the kids, but it was a fun game. This one came out in 2002. It was the fourth game in that franchise, and I remember playing some of the Grand Theft Auto games before this one, but this is the one that really kind of grabbed me because it had the coolest video graphics, it had the coolest sound, the gameplay and characters were interesting. It took place in the 80s, so it had all this 80s music. Like you get in a car and there'd be like an 80s radio station playing. The Vice City of it is kind of a poorly disguised Miami, and so basically you're running around in the streets of Miami, and the designers took the TV show Miami Vice and the movie Scarface as their two main inspirations when they created this game. And it fits. It's got that feel of the 80s Miami, and then of course the the violence of Scarface. One of the cool things I like about the game too is it actually had real actors in it. Ray Liotta plays the main character, Tommy Vercetti.
That's right.
And other actors in this one included Tom Sizemore, and Burt Reynolds was even in this game.
Burt was in it?
So Burt Reynolds was,
Didn't know that.
So yeah, it won Game of the Year from a bunch of different magazines. It was definitely the game that sort of elevated the Grand Theft Auto franchise to the status that it became. It was my favorite game of those. Again, it came out in 2002. I'm sure I played it that year and maybe the next year or two, and probably have not even seen it since. So it's probably been 20 years since I've seen this game, but I played it enough that it stood out and it had to make my Mount Rushmore because it was a blast. And, and like a lot of the games, if we were to turn it on right now, it would probably look bad. At the time, It seemed revolutionary, the graphics and how fast things moved. I'm sure it looks shitty now.
Yeah, but you can't base it on that because in its time, it didn't. That wasn't a downfall to it. That wasn't a negative.
No.
Just like NHL 94, it's not like the graphics were great. It didn't matter. The game was badass.
Yeah.
If
you say so.
Back to GTA. I don't know this, but I suspect this. So I'm not basing this on any factual thing, but maybe I'm right just out of luck. I feel like that is the game that kind of changed the industry, that kind of forced video games to have ratings, like for mature audiences. I feel like it's either that game or Call of Duty that probably got that rolling because of, again, the content. I mean, in Grand Theft Auto, not only are you stealing cars and killing people and beating up people, you could get hookers, couldn't you?
Yeah, no, there was the content went way beyond just over the top violence. there was
real adult content in that game.
There were prostitutes. There were drug deals. I mean, there was all kinds of. I mean, you had missions that involved committing these heinous crimes. So it was
heinous.
The goal of the game was to do it. It wasn't like something you could do on the side. It was actually part of the game.
If only I could think of a word that rhymes with heinous. Oh, I guess there's one.
Well, you are a heinous anus, so that works.
Wow. Well, it's a good pick, man. I played it. I had a few buddies who really got into it. Not on my list, but I can certainly understand why it would be because I know how big that game really was, just nationally. It was huge. I get it, but like I said, I'm going to keep going in my kind of order. And the next one, again, I'm going to be very specific. It is a sports game, and this is on a different video game platform than we've talked about yet. This was exclusively on the Sega Genesis system, and this would have been World Series 1998. And again, it's kind of sadly, or not sadly, I'm picking it for the very same reasons of NHL 94. So many heated games against your buddies that they just kind of live on because, again, we took this stuff so personal.
It's out of here!
And we were all very competitive by nature. And just like NHL, I was always the Chicago Blackhawks for NHL 94. But for World Series 1998, I was always the Cleveland Indians. I just, again, other than NHL 94, this might be the next game that during that high school or just after high school life, this is the one that we actually did play an awful lot. And on my team, it was Kenny Lofton, it was David Justice, and every time David Justice would hit a home run, as the ball's soaring through the air, I would yell, "Just ice!" And then, that sometimes would start. That would start the blood boiling for whoever you were playing, specifically my buddy Mike. But yeah, it had Jim Thome, Omar Vizquel at shortstop, Manny Ramirez, Albert Bell. Obviously, the graphics, if you look it up now, they wouldn't add up to a whole lot, considering how old it is. But it was a great game, man, and it filled an awful lot of our time in our late teen years, possibly into our early 20s.
Well, how old were you in 1998?
Well, I'd have been
22 or something.
I'd have been 20, 21.
But it would still result in the fisticuffs, though, even into your 20s.
Well, not necessarily fisticuffs, but certainly heated arguments that could even linger through the night or weekend.
Some bitterness.
Yeah, that's again. It was just how competitive us dinglings really were.
That seems kind of similar to your NHL game. I mean, in the sense that a bunch of ding dongs in the basement arguing and then pushing each other around. So I mean, it's weird that you have two games on your list of all of your Mount Rushmore, of all talking about the history of video games, going back all the way to Bertie the Brain and Pong, and then but you have two games that are really that similar. I'm kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, and again, it's probably based on just hours played and just how heated it really was. And I mean, when we get to the end, I have an honorable mention one that takes this even further, where shit really did get physical. And it didn't make my top four, but it's one that I will quickly reference. So, but yeah, my third pick, it's World Series 1998, Sega Genesis, killer game, great baseball game. And I know kids now play the show, like my son. And that's awesome too. Obviously, I love it. But it's come a long way. But video games just simply have in general.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But back in '98, man, that was it, dude.
The show is a fun game. I haven't played that game in quite a while, but I have played it years ago. I played and it was fun. I'm sure the current game. Well, I mean, I see the commercials on TV and it blows me away. I mean, it looks like you're watching a damn like an actual baseball game. It's pretty wild. But my last pick, we're up to number 4 for me, is also in the sports world. Although I'm taking us out of the basement. We're going away from home here. We're going to the old video arcade for my last pick.
Here we go.
And
pocket full of coins.
That's right. Get your roll of quarters out. We're heading down to the arcade, and we're going to be playing NBA Jam from specifically the original in 1993. And this game did come out on PlayStation and probably 14 other different platforms over the years. But the game that I played and my friends and I played was at the arcade, and it was a blast. Oh my God, it was a blast. I mean, actually, I looked it up. You can even play this game on Apple phones, iPhones, and Android phones now. So that's how. Obviously, it's not going to look quite like the original NBA Jam did, but this game still exists to this day. 30 years later.
Wow.
So it definitely spawned a lot of future versions. I always played, you mentioned the teams and the players that you played. I always played as the Phoenix Suns, which is kind of ironic because I live in Phoenix now, and it's completely ironic. The reason I played that, though, with the Suns is because Charles Barkley and Dan Marley crushed it. Those two guys were monsters. Barkley was a beast. But just like in the NBA, Barkley was a beast below the basket, and Marley could drop threes on you left and right. And it was just a perfect team between them.
Boom shakalaka!
That was a great game, man. It was so animated and different, with the certain sound effects and when you'd start to get hot. And
I do have a funny fact about this game too. This is gonna be one that's gonna kind of hit you close to home a little bit. So the designers of NBA Jam were huge Detroit Pistons fans. So you got to remember the era we're talking about here. It came out in 93, so early 90s. Who were the Pistons' biggest rival?
The Bulls.
The Chicago Bulls. Yeah. And so if you played NBA Jam as the Pistons and you were playing against the Bulls, the Pistons would always have an advantage. They programmed it that way.
What a bunch of dicks.
Yes.
No wonder.
And I even read a quote from the guy that created it. He said, if it comes down to the last shot and you're playing as the Bulls, good luck. You're not going to make it.
Really? It was
Yeah.
that specific.
He mentioned this. This is after, years later. He said this, but if you played that game at the time, you probably noticed that the Bulls would lose to the Pistons on a regular basis. Apparently, I never played as either of those teams, so I don't have a fact to back that up other than what I've read online.
Wow. I knew something was up with that game because I used to play and I was the Bulls a lot of the time. And if I was not them, I was usually like the Miami Heat.
Do you remember who the players were for the Bulls? I mean, Pippen was one. Jordan was not involved in this game.
No,
because
he couldn't.
He had his own. Owned his own likeness.
Yeah. That's why I kind of drifted off the Bulls because I don't remember who was the teammate of Pippen's because you're right, it wasn't Jordan, but I liked the Heat because Tim Hardaway could hit shots from damn near anywhere on the court.
The Magic was good because Shaq was always pretty good on with the Magic.
That's one of those games that the minute you said it, I'm like, oh, that's a good pick.
I don't even know if I ever played it on a PlayStation or a Genesis either. To be honest, I know it existed. I have no memory of ever playing that game in a house.
See, and I think I was introduced to it on Sega Genesis.
Okay.
Same era as the World Series 98 game I was just talking about. I think that was the platform, and then it turned into other, maybe the original PlayStation 2.
We'll get to the honorable mentions at the end, but I'm going to come back to the arcade again for an honorable mention at the end. So
there's good stuff in that arcade.
Just teasing. Yeah, it was. I mean, back in the day. So what do you got for number 4?
All right, I'm gonna end with this, and it comes with a little bit of a story because it's a game I probably would have never really known without this story. Now, on previous podcast episodes, I'm sure people have heard how you and I became friends and met in the mid-90s. We worked in radio together. And this next game, my last pick, is very much tied to an experience or a contact I met through my radio position. I was in Las Vegas for the Billboard Music Awards. And when we would do these type of events, we would be there basically for a week broadcasting with our disc jockey. And we were the promotion and marketing people who would run around and try to get interviews and round up celebrities and artists to put on our radio station. This younger fella, he was around my age at the time. He walks up to me and he's by himself wearing a backpack. I remember his name, and this is not made up. This was his name. Ducky U. What? Was his name.
Huh?
Ducky U.
What?
We start talking. Next thing I know, he's asking me if I play like Madden, if I play, NBA Live or NHL or you name it, Tiger Woods Golf. I'm like, yeah, man, I love all those games. And he goes, well, here's my card. I rep and I work for EA Sports. And I'm like, no shit, really? Well, long story shorter, we end up becoming like a legit I become a legit contact for him. And for many years, approximately like 1998 to about 2002, maybe 2003, every time EA Sports would release a new game, it didn't matter what sport. It was just simply under the umbrella of EA Sports. My guy, Ducky, he would ship to me at the radio station 50 to 100 copies of the new game for nothing. And just wanted me to give them away. Again, any one of the EA Sports. But this one, my final pick, sorry for the buildup, it was called SSX Tricky. And it was, ironically, the very first game he ever shipped to me, 50 copies of. And this was for PlayStation 2. Now, SSX Tricky is it's a snowboarding game.
Welcome to SSX Tricky. This is going to be fun.
And it was released in 2001, and this specific game. So maybe I'm getting my timeline wrong, but whatever. You get the point. I got so damn addicted to Tricky that I would almost bet truly legitimate large sums of money that I own a world record for this video game. There was one specific course called Garibaldi on the Tricky game, where I believe, and I still have, sadly, and this is no lie, I still have the memory card that has this information saved on it, my high score for Garibaldi, and I think it's like 1.4 million and some change. And the minute you started learning like how to do Uber tricks, what they'd call in the game, you would rack up points, and my God, hours and hours of fun. I actually might say it's my favorite video game of all time is Tricky.
Wow.
And I wouldn't have ever known about it or played it if it hadn't been for my guy, Ducky U, meeting him just coincidentally, getting along and just being polite. And next thing I know, I get on his mailing list for the radio station for him to send all these copies to. And then the little bonus on top is throughout the whole damn game when you're playing it and when the game starts, you're always constantly hearing Run DMC's song Tricky.
I remember that game.
Yeah, and still to this day. And yes, you were one of those people I gave a copy of this game to.
Yeah.
It's sad how good I got at that game. It's almost embarrassing. Because I played this well into adulthood, even on a PlayStation 2, because unfortunately, and it kind of pisses me off, they never made a newer version of this specific game. I'd give anything, because I did introduce, my son he does snowboard, and he does play Tricky, but that's when I got to pull up the old PlayStation 2 and connect it to the TV quick.
No, I remember that game well. I remember you playing it. I remember being with you and watching you play it, because you were damn good at that game. You were probably better at that game than I've ever seen any human being be at any one game in my life.
I swear I can't even be humble about it. It's almost like I wish there would have at the time been a contest to go compete nationally, but again, specifically on that one course. And you're right, I was like a damn savant. I was just dialed in. Super Mario Brothers is special to me because it got the whole interest ignited when you're young. But SSX Tricky just brought my interest to video gaming to a different level. And I would have never guessed it. And that's what makes it so cool, because I was never into snowboarding personally. I'd tried it a few times and I hurt myself pretty bad. And that was the end of it. I went right back to my joystick remote control and crushed it on Tricky.
Yeah, keep your hands on your joystick, and you'll be safe that way. Tricky didn't live on the way Madden and NHL, all those games did. It didn't have iterations that came out every year. It just didn't happen. So it was a one and done kind of situation. So I guarantee you, much like a lot of people, maybe people don't know Diablo. I guarantee you, there's a lot of people that have no idea what you're talking about with Tricky. They're going to have to Google it.
I'll give you that.
It's going to be a obscure one to most people. But I did, like when I mentioned all those years of playing Madden, probably a lot of them were thanks to those free games. I don't remember buying one in that era.
Yeah, because really, once we met this EA Sports rep,
Ducky
you, man, wherever you are, Ducky you. What? And the other one too. Speaking of that memory card, on that same memory card, I also played a ton of EA Sports Tiger Woods Golf, and on that memory card, I have proof that I got a hole-in-one on a par 4 on Tiger Woods Golf. I don't remember what year it was specifically, but it was worthy enough to keep it on the memory card, just as evidence, Exhibit A, Your Honor. I really did pull that off.
That's what she said.
That was one of my favorite pop duos from the early 2000s, Ducky and Marky. Those were good times. Well, I'm glad you're done with Ducky. Let's move on from him.
All right, so let's hear about this honorable mention arcade game that you were teasing the crowd with.
Oh, yeah. This is a game that I'm almost positive nobody listening will have any idea what I'm talking about, including you. I don't think you will have ever heard of this game. I think I've only seen it one time, and it only existed in one place, but it was at the University Billiards in Fridley. And I know you know that place. It's changed names over the years.
Two Stooges now.
But this is back in the 90s when it was still called University Billiards, and me and my buddies would go there, and my one friend in particular, my friend Justin, and I would pump quarter after quarter after quarter into this stupid game, and it was called Hammerin' Harry. And it was the stupidest game, but we'd go there, we'd play pool for like an hour, and we'd play fucking Hammerin' Harry for an hour.
What is the game? Like whack-a-mole?
No, it was a video game. I mean, it was a true screen video game where the generic broad strokes version of this game is that you're basically a construction worker, and he'd had his hard hat and he had his big hammer, and he'd go and he'd there's these bad guys that were shooting like nail guns at him.
So wait, I mean, are you doing this? Really was like you were going to put this on your Mount Rushmore?
No. This was never going to go on my Mount Rushmore. I just had to mention it because I probably put more quarters into this stupid game than any other video game in my life. It doesn't make it, just because I spent a lot of money on it, doesn't make it worthy of Mount Rushmore. But I had to mention it, and if Justin's listening to this, he'll get a kick out of me saying it, because on a rare occasion, he and I will mention Hammer and Harry.
You are right. I've never heard of that my entire life.
No, and I've never seen it again. I've never seen it anywhere else again. I'm going to try and find at least a picture of it, and so those people who are watching us on the YouTube video screen can see a picture of this stupid thing, or if they want, they can Google it and find it. But it was a weird game, but it was addicting. In a weird way, it was addicting. And you'd get to the end boss, and he'd be like some big muscle guy throwing 2x4s at you, because the whole thing was around a construction site. You were hammering Harry.
I think I have heard of Hammering Harry, but I remember it in a different way. It was at the video store behind the cowboy saloon doors that I wasn't allowed to go back into.
If you weren't allowed back there, then how did you see it?
Well, I hung out near those doors.
Every once in a while, it would pop open. You'd take a peek.
Yep, it was like the little bobblehead that would lean in there and look quick.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole other podcast.
I love the reference, and I love the university billiards reference, because again, that's another tie you and I have. We've played years and years with your buddies, and I just kind of joined the crew. We played in a billiards league for a long, long time.
Yeah,
that was good stuff. Good times. And here, one last honorable mention, just because I mentioned it. When it came to like getting physical, my same buddy, Mike, still to this day, his mom lives in the same house that I'm talking about, where we played a lot of these video games. And in his old bedroom, there are still holes in the sheetrock in the wall from one of us losing one of these heated battles, which should have been Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah,
finish him.
Yeah, I considered Mortal Kombat.
I did too. I really did, because again, this is about as like bloodthirsty of a game as I've ever been involved in. Where adrenaline, rage, anger. It brought out all of those things when you'd play, and if you lost, I was always Sub-Zero, and he was like Johnny Chang or Scorpion, and it was again one of those first games where at our age at that time, I think also against Sega Genesis, where you could rip someone's head off and hold it up and their spine would be hanging from it.
Yeah, no, I loved that game, and I think I played it as Sub-Zero a lot too. He was definitely probably one of, and I think I played it as Scorpion too. But that was a blast. I loved that game.
Yeah, that was good stuff, man. This is one where, again, we say it every episode, please be a part of this and play along. I would love to see other people's choices for their video games.
And I hope people hit us with some obscure stuff too. I mean, because there's games. We always say, what's your Mount Rushmore? Don't give us answers that you're looking like, what's the most popular games of all time? That is not what this is all about. I mean,
no,
NHL 94 is not going to be on that list. Diablo's probably not going to be on that list. Madden, maybe. Mario probably would be, but give us the stuff that's your personal list. That's what we want to hear, even if it's so obscure we've never heard of it.
Exactly.
And if anyone has heard of Hammer and Harry, please do tell us.
Well, that's the thing about this, and that doesn't just go for video games. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is, what is your Mount Rushmore? Not what you think it should be, not what you think it would be if you took some census, some poll.
Yep.
It's what means the most to you, what has the most memory behind it, what impacted you or changed your opinion or got you excited. It could be any or all the above. So please interact. Check us out on our website. It's whatsyourmountrushmore.com. We're on all the socials. And again, we're every week we come and go with a new episode, and we're having that much more fun week to week. We can feel that this is being received, it seems, really well. And we're having a blast doing it. And I don't mean to be a broken record saying that every time, but it's true. So we appreciate you giving this a listen. But we also want to hear your opinions, your picks.
Let's wrap it up.
All right. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Quick, and we will see you soon with our next episode with God knows what that'll feature. But thank you, Benchwarmer Bob's.